There are people that have worked incredibly hard to get to where they are in life. And unfortunately, Gregg Berhalter is not one of those people. See, he nearly sent Gio Reyna home from the World Cup, and I'm going to give you a full timeline of what happened so that you can properly understand how ridiculous it is that Gregg Berhalter is still in charge of the U.S. national team. But to start this journey, we need to go back to 2018. So we're going to hop in our time machine and go to the small island nation of Trinidad and Tobago, where the United States was defeated mightily by both Trinidad and Tobago in order to keep the United States out of the 2018 World Cup. This was a sin, and so the United States head coach Bruce Arena resigned. The head of the U.S. Soccer Federation, he resigned. Sunil Gulati, really not relevant. But what is relevant is the fact that that left the COO of the U.S. Federation in charge. Now, he has a name that you might recognize. His name is Gio Berhalter. And in case you're wondering if that was a coincidence, it's not. Gio Berhalter is Gregg Berhalter's brother, and after the resignations failing to qualify for the World Cup, he was the highest ranking member at the U.S. Federation. Now, you might have never heard the word nepotism before, but fortunately, I've come armed with a definition, shall we? Nepotism, the practice among those with power or influence of favoring relatives, friends, or associates, especially by giving them jobs. Now, fortunately for Gio Berhalter, develop a plausible deniability, the COO is not directly in charge of hiring the head coach of the U.S. national team. The COO is in charge of hiring the technical director, which was a vacant position, which is in charge of hiring the head coach of the U.S. national team. So Gio Berhalter appointed this guy, Ernie Stewart, to be the technical director of the U.S. setup, who promptly interviewed one person in a 14-month search for the head coach, and that person was Greggy B. Gregg Berhalter. They also claimed to interview one other person named Oscar Pareja, who worked in the U.S. setup, but in a falling apart of their story that absolutely no one could have seen coming, Oscar Pareja came out and said that he wasn't interviewed. So, and maybe you're sitting there thinking that, well, Gregg Berhalter got hired, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was nepotism. He could be, better than head coach Julen Lopetegui, who wanted the job and had an undefeated record with the Spanish national team, which is better than the U.S. national team. But that is not true. Gregg Berhalter has a 39% win percentage in the MLS and was fired from a Swedish second division team for, quote, not being attacking enough. This is not exactly a resume that would typically get somebody hired to a top 20-25 national team, but I feel like you already knew that. We're going to stop at this moment to give a little respect to Gregg Berhalter, because he did used to play for the U.S. national team and was a professional player in Europe for a long time. Did I mention he's won 0 trophies in his managerial career until he became the coach of the U.S. national team? That feels relevant. And all of this sets the stage for him to lead the United States national team for the last 4 years, where by most measures he'd been fairly successful. We made it to the World Cup on goal difference. We still made it to the World Cup, and we did win the Nations League in extra time, surviving the worst Mexico team in 44 years, and then we won the Gold Cup, which was essentially a B team tournament. Now we get back in our time machine and we're headed back to the present day, which is the World Cup. Now during the World Cup, Gio Reyna played a grand total of 52 minutes. If you don't know who Gio Reyna is, he is arguably the most talented player in the U.S. national team. He literally just turned 20 years old, and when he was 17, he played 32 matches for Borussia Dortmund. Injuries have plagued him over the last couple of seasons, but he was absolutely fit and already has 16 appearances with the U.S. national team as a teenager. Just this season, he's played 5 Champions League matches and had 2 assists. He's played 10 Bundesliga matches, which is the vast majority available over the course of the season so far, and he's scored 2 goals. In case you're unfamiliar with the U.S. national team, there are not a lot of other prolific starting players for top 25 clubs in the world available to the U.S. national team. And after all this weirdness of the World Cup with Reyna not playing, Gregg Berhalter goes on a speaking tour. I guess this is what you do after a World Cup. He went to something called the Howe Institute for Society, which is definitely doing something for society. And he gave a speech about moral leadership that was expressly off the record, according to U.S. Soccer. The quote is as follows. In the last World Cup, we had a player that was clearly clearly not meeting expectations on and off the field, one of 26 players, so it stood out. As a staff, we sat together for hours deliberating what we were going to do with this player. He said in excerpted quotes published literally by the newsletter of this thing, because they just forgot it was off the record. We were ready to book a plane ticket home. That's how extreme it was. That is insane. That's insane. The moment you say something like that in public, that you were ready to send a player home from the World Cup, that is absolutely front page news. Like that, what is going on? So the first question everybody's going to ask when that comes out is who? And then literally 2 hours later, an article comes about on The Athletic with a giant picture of Gio Reyna's head on it. I mean, it's the same day. It's December 11th that this article came out on Pro Soccer Wire. And this came out at 6:25 p.m. So there's really not a lot of time between the two. And the information is just starting to trickle out at this point. The only thing this provided us more was that Gio Reyna was not providing full effort in training before the first game against Wales. So this wasn't just a reaction to him not playing. This was, oh my goodness, he's not even trying before the tournament started. The drama surrounding Reyna crescendoed during the Wales game. He threw his shin guards after he didn't play. Then Berhalter goes over to the media and he says, well, he's a little injured. And then Reyna says, I'm not injured. Actually, in the span of 2 minutes. I mean, how do these guys not see this coming? This sparked a never-proven controversy that Berhalter wanted Reyna to lie and say he was injured to take heat off. I don't actually support that one. I don't think that that's something that happened. And then we have the same old story that Berhalter kind of mumbled his way through the rest of the tournament, that it was timing and circumstance, and it just wasn't the right time for Reyna to play, or all this while subbing in a guy named Jordan Morris, who I don't think has scored for the U.S. national team in like 4 years and plays for the Seattle Sounders of the MLS. Now, Jordan Morris is a perfectly fine player, but compared to Reyna, he sucks. The last goal I can find him scoring for the U.S. national team in a competitive match is 2017. So he's a striker, by the way. And I'll just say something off the top. If I'm Gio Reyna and I am who I am, and Jordan Morris is playing ahead of me, I would also be mad. And I like to think of myself as a pretty even keel individual. The first thing that Reyna does is kind of light Berhalter's world on fire about the fact that he talked about this in a room full of people at this freaking summit to begin with. He said, I hope not to comment on matters of the World Cup. It is my belief that things that happen in a team setting ought to remain private. That being said, statements have been made that reflect on my professionalism and character, so I feel the need to make a brief statement. Just before the World Cup, Coach Berhalter told me that my role at the tournament would be limited. Stop the rest of this statement. That justifies everything that Gio Reyna did to me and makes this one of the most insane things I've ever seen. How do you go to your best player, arguably the best, most talented player on your team, and tell them before the World Cup starts, like a million things could happen. Players could get hurt, the way a game could go, tactically you need to switch it. Like, even if you weren't going to start him, how do you go to one of your best players, inarguably, and tell him that he is not going to play a major role in this World Cup? And then expect a 19-year-old kid who is fully expecting, as well as everybody in the bar I was watching the game with, to be on that field. The bar wasn't expecting to be on the field. We thought he was going to be on the field because he is better than the other players that would be on the field in his place. You expect him to not react it. Oh, you'd have to be an above and beyond individual not to react the way that he reacted, which he moped around in training, right? He didn't try. Honestly, I wouldn't have been surprised if he just didn't show up. He called out sick. He's like, screw you, man. But seriously, what are you talking about? And I totally get that as a human reaction. And I feel like if you were a coach, you have to expect that and to manage it. And you have to, most importantly, not do what set this off in the first place. That being said, the next part of his statement was, I was devastated. No sh**. I am someone who plays with pride and passion. Soccer is my life, and I believe in my abilities. I fully expected and desperately wanted to contribute to the play of a talented group as we tried to make a statement at this World Cup. I'm also a very emotional person, and I fully acknowledge that I let my emotions get the best of me and affect my training and behavior for a few days after learning about my limited role. That is an eloquent apology. That's like a fabulous apology, and by the way, is far better than what Gregg Berhalter said as an apology for saying that Gio Reyna was injured when he wasn't. By the way, Gregg Berhalter, when confronted about saying Gio Reyna wasn't 100%, when Gio Reyna said he was 100%, said, speaking of the 4-year journey, right, there's been also 4 years of interacting with you guys, the press contingent. And what I'd say is, I'll leave it to you to decide if I ask Gio to lie about it. What is that? What kind of word salad alphabet soup piece of shit is that? That's just not who I am. Cool, that's not what I represent. Cool. So, if you have to take Eric's word or my word, Eric Winalda being the guy that reported that he was asking Gio Reyna to lie about it or whatever, feel free. But I know what happened. That's not what I represent. Cool. Like every other person, Gio's a member of this team that we can care deeply for and we know can help the team. It's a matter of when he can help us and how he can help us. That's a nice canned statement to put at the end there. But what a weird apology where you have a 20-year-old kid and likely his entire PR team coming up with a fabulous, eloquent apology for being overly emotional after being told that his lifelong dream of playing in a World Cup was actually going to be a bit part role behind Jordan Morris. I apologized to my teammates and coach for this, and I was told I was forgiven thereafter. I shook off my disappointment and gave everything I had on the field, including a 45-minute stint at the end of the Netherlands game in the round of 16. That's not in a statement, but that is true. I am disappointed that there's continuing coverage of this matter, as well as some highly fictionalized versions of events, and extremely surprised that anyone on the staff would contribute to it. Coach Berhalter, names him here, has always said that issues that arise within the team will stay in-house so we can focus on team unity and progress. I love my team, I love representing my country, and I'm focusing now only on improving and growing as a soccer player and a person. And that's essentially it. But Gio Reyna says that he was told before the World Cup that he wasn't going to play, and then Gregg Berhalter continues to air the story as some sort of moral coaching lesson about how he got this close to sending a teenager home for acting upset that he wasn't going to achieve his lifelong dream largely at this tournament. Absolutely insane. But I think I found what actually pushed Gio Reyna over the edge. So after the effort issue continued after the Wales game where Gio Reyna did not play, he was approached by DeAndre Yedlin and Aaron Long. Yedlin I don't have an issue with, but Aaron Long approaching Gio Reyna to try and get him to provide more effort and training because he's moping around after not playing strikes me as bizarre, considering Aaron Long's defining talent for the U.S. national team is just kind of being there. I have immense respect for professional athletes. Aaron Long is 10 times the athlete I will ever be in my entire life, and he went to a World Cup, and I didn't. But Aaron Long only made the World Cup team because Chris Richards got hurt. He didn't play a second, and that was deserved based off of form and just overall talent level. And so for Aaron Long to be going up to Gio Reyna, who is at worst a starlet on this U.S. national team, and trying to talk him out of being a mopey teenager because he isn't achieving his lifelong goal, strikes me as bizarre. I would have lost it if I was Reyna, and I imagine if you were in his situation, you might have been at a similar level once Aaron Long walked up to talk to you about how you should be giving more effort in training. Now, Gio Reyna is going to be an important part of the U.S. national team for the next decade, and I think this whole fiasco with accidentally leaking a huge piece of locker room drama is going to hurt Berhalter's ability to be the coach for the next 4 years, which, as we've already documented, he should have never been the coach to begin with because the entire hiring process was flawed. Those people are now out of power, though, so I doubt that he's actually going to be re-signed. Nico Cantor sums this up best after Berhalter accidentally leaked this massive piece of juicy drama, and that is, how do you regain credibility and trust from a group now if you're Berhalter? I would look no further than the fact that Clint Dempsey commented on Gio Reyna's Instagram post saying, "Head up, keep balling." That is the all-time leading goal scorer for the U.S. national team, picking sides. And I think there's really only one side to pick.